7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you are live.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ways and Means Committee meeting of Tuesday, October 20, 2020. It's 5:30 p.m., and I call this meeting to order. I'm the chair, Otis Wheeler. This meeting is being recorded by the Ways and Means Committee. If anyone else present is doing the same, please notify me at this time. Thank you, Mr. Grazik. And Counselor Bottomley, was that recorded in the minutes?
Yes, although I could use some help spelling the last name. Yep. Thank you.
Very good. And as long as the ball's in your court, Counselor Bottomley, would you please take the roll?
Yes, I'm Counselor Bottomley. I'm here. Counselor DeSorger.
Present.
Counselor Elmer.
Here.
Counselor Forgy.
Here.
And Counselor Wheeler.
Here. So we have a quorum. We have no approval of minutes. We have no public hearing. We will jump into our only motion of the evening, which is to approve a prior year invoice. And I will go ahead and read that. I move that it be ordered that the Greenfield City Council approve the payment of prior year FY20 invoice for Equifax in the amount of $75 to be paid from the FY21 Parking Human Resources budget. Do I hear a second?
Second, 4G.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So you'll see in your packet the memo from Director Gilman, which says the invoice was inadvertently overlooked and not paid on time, and that's the reason for this. Any questions from counselors? We've had a couple of these from Equifax, I think it was, that seemed to keep slipping through, but it's for a small amount, and I'm sure we'll get the hang of it. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hand. I see 5 hands. Opposed? Abstain? It passes unanimously. So next on your agenda, there was a motion to appropriate $5 million for construction of a new fire station. That has been rescinded by the mayor's office, and a modified order has been submitted. It was not submitted in time for this body to deliberate on it tonight, but so any votes that we take around recommendations on the modified order will happen in November. But we have a lot of people here at the meeting, and we did have it posted that we would be discussing the fire station, and this is just a modification of that. So I think it's in order for us to go ahead with asking our questions and getting prepared so that we can make an informed vote in November. So I was told earlier this week that Neil Joyce, OPM Neil Joyce of the fire station, would be here, but that he would be late. So any questions that we have for him will, I understand, have to be saved for after 6 p.m. But we have the mayor and Director Gilman and a representative, at least one representative each from the fire station building committee, the library building committee, the fire chief. So I welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to the meeting tonight. I do apologize to counselors that I see on the call. We won't be able to take your questions because we don't want to obtain a quorum, but thank you for signing in. And we definitely appreciate that. And I think there will be no shortage of questions tonight. So that said, I think I'm gonna take the liberty as chair to start off by just sort of laying the groundwork for the meeting tonight. I think that it's been a rocky process to get where we are. And it behooves us to acknowledge that. I think that the state of emergency created by COVID-19 caused somewhat of a communication breakdown to occur, which I think resulted in somewhat of a loss of trust between the parties. And I'm happy to say that I think that's healing, and that there's been a lot of good communication and certainly plenty of meetings recently. But there's a saying that trust leaves in buckets but returns in a trickle. And so I think that if as counselors we have a lot of questions, it's just because of that process of regaining trust. It's slow, but I'm confident that we're going to get there. And as chair of this meeting, I see my role to enable this body to ask the questions that will empower counselors, hopefully, to feel confident in voting for the outcome that will be best for the community. And, it's not our job as counselors to be project managers. We don't want to micromanage, but to the degree that some questions tonight might stray into the weeds, or at least into the details, I hope that it will be in the interest of restoring communication and trust. So that's my long-winded introduction to the meeting and what I hope that we can accomplish tonight. And at this point, I'll shut up and let my committee members ask the first question. And when you ask a question, if you can, address it to whoever you would like to, or you think is most qualified to answer it. But if you don't address it to anyone, I will most likely punt it to the mayor, who can also make that call. So, counselors, who wants to start? Counselor DeSorger.
Thank you, Vice President Wheeler. That was a very good introduction. So I have some questions. I actually put in some questions, half of which I'm going to withdraw to the to Director Gilman. But my questions are actually to Director Gilman. I would like the first thing, and this may be a good thing for all of us, is for you to talk about, to speak with us about the $1 million that we're talking about from the bond fund. And maybe you could just go into a little, that's my first question. Maybe you could go into a little explanation of that.
And Director Gilman, before you get going, let me just say what I neglected to say, which some folks at home might not know, is that the $5 million order was rescinded by the mayor's office and replaced by a request for a $6 million appropriation, which is $5 million out of borrowing and $1 million out of bond premium. So I just wanted to mention that to lead into what Director Gilman's about to say. So the floor is yours, Liz.
Thank you. First of all, I want to talk just of what is bond premium and where did this come from. You have received an order for bond premium for GSET for fiber. Also, we voted some bond premium during the last capital round. So this is nothing new, but may be new to you. In 2016, Massachusetts passed the Municipal Modernization Act. And what that allowed was for when you bond for a capital project, you can receive a premium. Well, what does that mean? That means that the market rate when you bonded was higher than the stated value on your notes. And therefore, the people who are bidding on your notes are willing to pay more, and it results in a premium. That premium now is allowed to A, reduce what you're bonding, or B, be put in a special fund, bond premium fund 1627 in Munis, to be used for capital projects. And they do need to have a life of 20 years. You know, it can't be used for like a study or a shorter term equipment, like say maybe technology or certain vehicles that don't have that type of life. And so as a result of the August 2019 bonding, which the larger projects that were bonded were the parking garage and the senior center. There's others, but those were the two large ones. It resulted in premium that was put in this fund. Now, the premium, when we bond, we bond many projects together. So I just want you to realize that some of the premium that is done by the enterprise funds, water, sewer, and GSET, have to stay with them. So in other words, it has to be kind of segregated out so that some is general fund and some is enterprise fund. So we do have this available for capital projects. At the time, we were planning on this for capital that is coming up, but in the meantime, we will be submitting for free cash, so we hopefully can replenish our capital stabilization in the meantime to accommodate some of these things, but it addressed the need at the moment, which is the fire station and the library. So we have in the bond premium account from that, we already have this, it's from the August 2019 bonding. For the general fund, we have $1,083,000. So we also pay bond expenses from this account. That's how it's set up. You have legal fees, you have issuance fees. So I don't want to make it zero, so we are putting $1 million for you to approve for the fire station. And hopefully that closes the gap enough for you to be comfortable. Does anyone
Follow up, if I may.
Sure.
So was that supposed to be used for anything else that we had approved?
No. Oh, no, it has not been appropriated. It would still go through an appropriation process.
Is there, may I continue, Councilor Wheeler?
Yes, you may.
Is there any other bond fund? Is there any other bond fund that we have any money in that we don't know about?
No. This, first of all, again, as I stated, it started in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was after the last bonding was 2016. So it was after that bonding. So that bonding didn't make it. So that had, I take that back, some smaller amounts did. So this is bond and ban. I also want to clarify that you can get premium on bans as well, that goes in there. So it is one fund that I have segregated. Each each time we bond, our financial advisor sends me what's called sources and uses. And it breaks out who generated the premium, like this
Mhm.
water did this, sewer did this. And so I track that and internally on a spreadsheet and know what we have to appropriate from for general fund or for water or for sewer or for GSET. And like I said, there is a order. I think it's is it second reading for GSET for bond maybe it's first reading. I'm losing track of time. That is coming from bond premium that was generated by GSET's bands.
Mhm.
And if you'll allow me to interrupt, the initial $10 million order for the fire station included within it language that would allow the bond premium attached to that, or maybe bond premium in general, to lower the cost of that order. Is that correct?
It is what is generated at the time you bond the 10 million. It is not
Right.
the existing have.
Right.
So who knows what that will be? You know, right now it's good, but it hasn't always been that great on the bond premium. So that was an effort to keep, because I know everyone was concerned on the payments, to keep the payments down. Bonding for less will keep the payments down.
Any follow-up questions on that, Councilor DeSorger?
Not on that.
I just want to see do other councilors have any questions about bonding, because it's involved and it's relevant. If not,
I
Yeah.
could use a little clarification. Why is it that the people who buy our bonds pay a premium? Why don't they pay the market rate?
Well, because our rate is lower, so they know what the market rate is, so they're willing to bid above our rate. So they're bidding in between the market and what our stated rate is.
yeah, my understanding of that is that the municipal bond markets are really efficient, and but again, I'm not an expert in the area. Okay. Any other questions? Next question, Councilor Forgy.
I'm trying to get unmuted. Am I unmuted?
Yes,
You
you are.
Okay, thank you very much. So, first we started with a $5 million dollar figure, and now it's a $6 million figure. And I appreciate going the extra mile to look for additional funding sources, definitely. And the figure 7 million's been out there. So I'm really anxious to know, like I think a lot of other councilors, what is the real number?
So if you don't mind me answering, you have appropriated 10 million.
Mm-hmm.
You have appropriated 550,000, of which less than 20,000 has been spent. It's 19,675. So that still leaves you 530,000 in the 550. So we're at 10,530,000, and we're asking for 6 million. So that brings us to 16,537,24, or sorry, 324. And if I look at the, I'm taking right from the presentation that Neil Joyce gave. His cost is for Coombs Ave is 17,312,500. So that difference right now is at 782,000. There are some couple of companies that are being around that I believe some conversations occurring on, and also worst case scenario, we will be submitting for free cash by the end of October. We may have, if we still are short, we may have to put in an order for free cash for the temporary housing to just make up whatever we're short at that point in time.
Clarification, if I may?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay, so when you're talking about the shortage, you're talking about the money going toward the temporary build out for the station?
I am talking the full amount that Neil Joyce presented, which includes temporary housing
Okay, okay.
of $17,312,500 for Coombs Ave. Wells was a little less.
But the 550,000 of which we've spent 20 on just 19,675.
Right.
10 million, and now a request for 6 million.
Right.
$1 million will come from a different source.
Right.
Okay. That brings us $780,000 short of the estimated cost of the project from Mr. Joyce.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mayor Wiedegartner.
And Liz can correct me if I'm wrong, but that $550,000, as I recall the order, a little bit maybe prior to my time or simultaneous with, was for the hiring of an OPM and perhaps a designer. So I guess my question is directed to Liz too. It's interesting to me that we've only spent 19,000, but we know that a certain amount of money in the neighborhood of 300 and maybe 60,000 is technically encumbered for that reason. And it's just that, we don't pay until people submit bills. So is that correct? I don't want people to get the idea that that $500,000 is out there for us to, I don't know what, buy, furniture for the new fire station or something. It is not.
What it is the OPM's cost is in Neil's presentation. It's in the 17,312,500. So that cost is in there. So it is available for those costs.
So the document, I'm sorry.
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead, Councilor Forgy.
The document that you're referring to from Mr. Joyce with the 17 million plus figure.
Yep.
Is which document? We've got so many of them right now.
It was the last one he sent out. It was I believe an 18-page PowerPoint. It was the financial breakout was on the very last page.
Okay.
Of the presentation.
I believe it was a July 20. It could have been a little later. Maybe we did an updated version. Neil can certainly tell you when he gets on, but presentation to certainly to the full council and maybe to Ways and Means prior to that. That piece I don't recall without looking. So it's Neil teases me because I'm always waving it in front of his face. It's the one that looks like this. I don't know if you can see it or not. But...
Okay, thank you.
And it was definitely shared with you.
Okay.
Yes, we had a special meeting just on the fire station.
Yeah, actually it was the special meeting. So whenever we had that.
Okay. And this
Go ahead.
This total figure from Mr. Joyce that seems to be what we need at this, which seems to be the figure to me anyway. That includes the purchase of land for permanent.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to ask a follow-up question to Councilor Forgy's question, which is, so we have this difference between the amount that's being requested and our estimates of what's needed. And yes, grants may cover that. However, to confirm, the mayor's office, you would still need to come back to council for approval to actually use those grants. Am I correct? Because it's not written in, because it would be above the order for authorization that's before us now. Does that make sense?
We do not bring all grants to city council.
Okay.
We have a CDBG department that
Yeah.
all don't vote on those grants. School department has grants all the time that city council does not vote on. Police department will have some smaller grants. So, you know, I think, and I, just to mention, the revised order has taken out the language in reducing the amount by grants.
Right.
So I just want to make you aware of that.
Got it. Thank you. Councilor Forgy?
Sorry, I'm sorry, Liz, you're the person of the hour here. Okay. So there was talk about the matching grant coming from the library, the State Library Board, and the 9 million that the town has to match as well. So I understand, maybe you can, okay, I understood that, for instance, if a project finished under budget, the remainder of that borrowing could be used, what I call it a tailing, but there might be another name for it, that could be used for a project of a like kind. In other words, if it came in if we finished at 8 million of our borrowing, and for the library, and there was still $1 million left over, quote unquote, left over. My question is, can it be used for a like or kind project, or do we run into an issue with the granting authority because it's a matching grant? So does every single piece of it have to go toward the library project?
I think you would have issues because of the grant. In other instances, you have councilors fairly often seen a repurposing of an authorization.
Thank you.
But those don't have grants involved. So I think you would, and I'm not saying the grantor would be opposed, but I think you would have to get permission. It's almost better to just rescind it and reauthorize in the same, order, submit 2 orders, rescind this and authorize another. And it's cleaner that way, quite honestly.
Okay. Is there anybody from the library board listening?
Yes, my understanding is at least Ed Berlin is on the call as City of Greenfield.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Thank you, Ed. Hi, Ed, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I would like to know how the independent fundraising is going on behalf of this library project.
It's going very well. I was told today that they've reached, in terms of pledges, the figure of $1.6 million.
Thank you.
Let me just say, my sense is that I'm not a member of the foundation, but those who I've spoken with are very, very optimistic that they will reach their $2 million goal.
That's very good news.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, further questions from counselors down that road or any other? Counselor, I'm going to go with Counselor DeSorger because it seems like maybe Counselor Elmer's having bandwidth issues. Oh,
I'm
hold on.
back, I think.
Okay. Counselor DeSorger, do you mind if we let Counselor Elmer go? Since he had, all right, the floor is yours, Phil.
I'm a little fuzzy now. I don't really understand why we're using a July number when there's been so much progress in terms of design and negotiation for land and so forth. And it wasn't clear to me if we were referring to the total cost that includes the temporary and the permanent fire station. Is that what the 17 something represents?
So this wasn't July. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but they did end up being able to reduce the cost of the temporary housing, if you recall, because they were going to use the Hope parking lot. So that reduced that amount. I believe it was in September when we held this meeting. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know the exact date, but
Look, I can jump in here. I found it. It's in an email that went to council on September 12th. It's titled GFD committee presentation 9/3/20, and I can share my screen if there's if people would like to see that. So we do have updated financials. I'm sure we can get more updated financials. Do we have any updates, Mayor, on negotiation or on the Maine and Coombs site?
Thank you for that. I don't know what Councilor Elmer is talking about in terms of progress. Is work continuing to be done? Yes. Our Neil and Dennis Ross continuing to work on right now, just the temporary, to sharpen pencils right and left? The answer is yes. So I consider that progress. And perhaps tonight, Neil will be able to share with you some slightly updated numbers, but that 17.3125 remains the total cost for now of the project. We have not completed negotiations on the property. I only just this afternoon, reasonably later in the afternoon, received the additional information that I was looking for from the broker for that property, so that now I will discuss that tomorrow. I see Neil has joined us, Otis, in case you didn't see him. But anyway, I will, I'll discuss it with our lawyer, and perhaps we'll have some additional information in the near future on what, how negotiations are. But right now we are continuing to be in negotiations. So we're leaving for now that $900,000 figure in there, and everything that's in that sheet. And I have done as much giving you the information as I possibly can. I was asked by President Stemple to please give you a timeline as to using those costs from that presentation, as to when and where we would be spending money, and the point at which, with only $10 million appropriated, we would begin to run out of money. So you have that information. And you have or should have the information from the 9/20 meeting, or whatever date you gave. It's my fault, Liz, for bringing up July and August, but there have been iterations, and that's just the way these projects go. I am quite certain the library was no different. They just were not under the same microscope. That's
clarify?
really all I have to say about that in answer to Counselor Elmer's question. It was a good question, and I hope he's satisfied with the answer at this point. Those are still the most updated numbers from September. We can, at some point in the very near future, give you more firm updated numbers, but only when all of those processes get done.
Counselor Elmer, follow up?
Yeah, what the progress I was referring to was the progress that the temporary committee and the permanent committee have made in terms of drawings, in terms of architecture. That's all since this September meeting, and I'm glad that Mr. Joyce is here, because maybe he's the guy to sort of give us a report on where we're at. You know, how far are we in the design? How close are we to putting out bids and so forth?
Thanks.
That is, if I could speak, Otis, I'm sorry. That's correct, Counselor Elmore. And anything you've seen up till now is really very preliminary. It's conceptual to give you an idea, which I think you also requested, or some of you did, as to where we're at in the process and what is the kind and quality of the work that we're doing. So it was not intended to be the final end all, the way it's going to be.
So I'll jump in here to say, I mean, I think my understanding is until we lock down permanent location, these numbers are still, they're not going to be sticky. They're still going to be a little slippery. But since Neil Joyce has joined us, and welcome and thank you for coming, Mr. Joyce. I know you're coming from another meeting, but I will throw it over to you now to just ask you the question that Counselor Elmer asked, which was that is this bottom line number that you provided in a presentation about a month ago for a single story Main Street and Coombs option of 17,312,000, and that's with temporary. Is that still that the number on the table? Nothing that you found out about the Hope Street lot has changed that or anything like that?
No, and just before I delve into the question, I do just want to thank the council and the committee for their patience with me tonight. I'm sorry I had another commitment, but very appreciative of the late start. So in terms of the question, yeah, the 17.3 million is still our best guess based on what we know now. The biggest questions, at least in my mind, that still remain is what we don't know. And what we don't know is what is waiting for us at Main and Coombs or any other site that comes our way. We have begun to do some investigative work on Hope and Prospect. We've been working with Marlo Warner and Paul Raskovich at the DPW to work on utility connections and start to flesh out the drawings and the schematics that we've been working on. We are anticipating going out for bids on the modular buildings that would be needed at that site for the temporary station. Our target date right now is December. We haven't really refined that all that much, but we are in the process of engaging sub-consultants and getting the design work done in earnest to meet that deadline. In terms of the permanent site, where, as the mayor noted, we're still in negotiations until a permanent site is selected. Obviously, we can't really start on that endeavor. We're anticipating somewhere in the range of 6 to 8 months for design time, and bids would be issued for the permanent station at some point next summer.
Thank you. Do councilors have any questions for Mr. Joyce? Councilor Forgy?
Thank you. Mr. Joyce, I was listening in on the meeting the other day. Maybe it was even yesterday. I don't know. The days just go by. About the cost estimates, preliminary cost estimates of the temporary. And if I am recollecting correctly, it's a ballpark of 2 million. Is that correct?
We did a conceptual estimate based on hired contractors performing all of the work. So we sort of took a worst case scenario for us, for the city, and we developed an estimate that reflected about $1.9 million in cost for the temporary station. That's correct.
Okay. And a follow-up, if I may?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I think at one of the last meetings that I think it was with the fire station building committee, you said something that was extremely important, and it came at the end of the meeting, and I think it needs to be reiterated, and that is that you need a site first, and we don't know what's going to happen with the site. Now, my understanding of the great pictures of the fire station in the newspaper that was published is just that, they're pictures. My understanding is that an architect has to have a site before they design the fire station, and input, of course, from the client. Is that correct? And could you really stress more in meetings? We need that site. We need to know what's waiting for us at that site.
I think that's correct. I think I've said that many times before, and will continue to. Nobody understands more than I am that we're under a tremendous time crunch in order to support the library and move this project forward. We've taken the temporary fire station and are tracking it sort of independently of the permanent. It is not related to the purchase of the permanent site. However, the term or the lease of the structures that are going to serve as the temporary station are time dependent. And the longer it takes us to get to a permanent site and a design based on that site, you're running into a potential overage on the lease term that we're seeking for the structures. So it's all related, it's all tied in. As much as I'm trying to separate it, it's a very tight knot right now, and we're just trying to work the best we can.
Thank you.
Okay. Next question. Anything from counselors that I haven't heard from yet? Or anything in general? Let's see.
Otis?
Yeah,
Can I
sorry.
follow up?
Go. Counselor Bottomley and then Elmer. Counselor Bottomley.
I had a question for Director Gilman. I was wondering, have you identified any possible sources for grants for that 780,000?
I believe the mayor is a better person to respond to that.
Okay.
Sorry. I know she has a couple ideas in the works.
She punted, they say. It's all fair. Yes, we are working with, yes and no, let me put it that way. We are working with MJ on the possibility of using CDBG funding. It appears that any manner in which we could use that CDBG funding really is later on in this project and may, because of that, so acquisition, demolition, those kinds of things, because of that may render it not really an option, but you don't know till you start exploring. With regard to other options at this time, there is certainly the ability, and that remains the case, and I'm just waiting to try to figure out as this project moves along and its funding gets more secure, what is the appropriate time to consider a USDA guaranteed loan, which is certainly available to us. We definitely qualify, and we have used it in the past. And they are often anxious to help us in whatever way they can, the USDA I'm talking about. Turns out the Congressman McGovern sits on the Agricultural Committee, so let me say that for whatever it's worth. Somebody needs to close their mic. Muted.
Okay, I think that's better.
Yeah, it is. Those are the options. There is the potential in the very near future of some release of grants from the state, but I really don't have enough information to be counting on those. Under the scenario that we're discussing tonight, we're looking in the neighborhood of whatever I said, or whatever was said, the shortfall, I guess, if you want to call it that, in the vicinity of 700,000. I think we have the opportunity to make that up. And if we don't, with your help, with regard to the financial order that we just put before you, we will be where we need to be in order to, create a fire station. The longer we wait, the more expensive it gets.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. And I'm going to talk through this a little bit since I think it behooves us to really understand the different directions that it could go. So we have this, what we're calling a deficit or a difference identified, potential deficit. It appears to be in the $750,000 range, which is the number identified in Neil Joyce's presentation for escalation costs. So certainly some very optimistic person could hope that, I suppose, that amount of money won't be necessary. But if it is, let's talk out the potential ways forward. If that amount is necessary and no grants are received, then the options would be to either come back to the council yet again or to reduce essentially the square footage or value engineer the fire station. Is that a good basic summary, Mayor?
Yes, I think that's correct. And oh, by the way, I neglected to say, if I could slide this in, John, in answering Councilor Bonneville's question, we have talked to the USDA. They are aware of what we will be doing should we need to. So it's not a cold operation. It is an operation that we've already started.
Okay. Any follow-up questions to that? If not, I think Councilor Elmer had a question. Councilor Elmer, are you there?
I'm on.
Oh, there you
Okay.
are.
This is a really dumb question, but the pressure is coming because we have to break ground by a certain time. Why can't we break ground right now? why can't we start digging the hill out that we have to hill out to, you know, on the library space? What's stopping us?
Okay, so who wants to let Phil bring his trowel down tomorrow?
I'm gonna say that question is above everybody on this call grade. We need Dan and or Phil O'Brien or other people. I mean I say that somewhat facetiously. Ed may be able to answer that question.
Yeah,
I don't think the project is quite there yet. So and besides that, we use that as a parking lot for the city, and it does generate revenue and will until the day that, and you should be thankful for that, and will until the day that we deem that it cannot be used anymore, which will be sometime in the spring or late midsummer.
follow up.
Yes.
The with all due respect, the revenue from a city parking lot shouldn't be determinative. But
You'd be surprised.
I would like to hear. We've got the head of the library committee and the head of the fire station committee on the line. I would like to hear from Ed what's stopping us from doing a little work so that we can say we're breaking ground. And and David Singer, perhaps he could talk about how he sees these two things working.
Sorry, I have a piece of chocolate in my mouth. What I can say is that, yes, we could break ground by April 21st, and then do it in a way that would comply with our grant. But breaking ground is really less the issue than actually beginning to build the library. And once we get behind the actual building of a couple to 3 months, then we're going to have some problems with the MBLC, and we're also going to have problems with the cost of the building is going to go up. So, Councilor Elmer, you're right. We could quote unquote break ground, but the issue for us is more than that. It's really actually building the building in earnest.
Can I explain why I'm asking?
Yeah.
Because we're all getting letters pro and con the library. And one of the questions that comes up is, how can we possibly start this if we don't know for sure that we can get the extension that we need? And I just can't tell how serious, what do we say to our constituents who are genuinely confused and thinking that maybe we're starting down something that the state's going to pull the rug out from under us?
As long as we start building the building in earnest, hopefully by the end of June, we won't have any problems at all. As we start going through the summer, the pressure increases. So the state wants us to build this building. And at our last meeting, our representative spoke and said that if it's a matter of months, she didn't think it would be an issue. But longer than that, that's when the uncertainty arises.
So then, David, if I could, when will the temporary be ready to accept the fire department?
Actually, a Neil question.
That's really not my, yeah, thank you for asking me that question. I thank you, appreciate that. But I can, before I defer, I can say this, that if we look at this in the most optimistic way, which is what I'm hoping all of us will do, then what we're trying to do is we're trying to plan parallel to all these issues about building the fire station, getting the temporary fire station on Hope Street by the beginning of July. And so that committee is set up to get estimates. It's set up to go forward. It's set up to start spending money. It's set up to set that up. At the same time, we're asking you to consider a request for $6 million, which is in addition to the $10,500,000 that's already been appropriated. And we're off now by $730,000. So at this point in time, I would say that we've moved pretty far on both fronts, and that for the library to be on track, it needs us to be gone. We're moving now to be gone. We need your help in funding. And we're almost at the point where either we're going to ask you for that additional $730,000, which means that the mayor would again need to change her order, or we're going to find a way to get that money. And one of the ways is by partnership, by forming an alliance with the library. The library has money from their foundation that Ed spoke of that can offset their $10 million funding. And there might be other ways in which the library can help us. So if we're down to $730,000, I'm feeling pretty good that we've done on our end what we need to do to provide you with the information to go forward to appropriate what we're asking you to do. As far as constituents, what was the question again, Phil?
Well,
People are worried.
We've got a timing issue.
Yeah, but I think, I'm sorry, okay, the timing, I think if the more that we, I mean this just as a citizen, I'm not being facetious. The more that we all move ahead and we do it quickly and thoughtfully, which I think this group can do, the more likely it is that the temporary fire station will be ready by July 1st or thereabouts, and the library won't have to go and ask for an extension. And I understand the counselors feeling a lack of trust or feeling getting pressure from constituents and having to make a tough decision, et cetera. But from my perspective, we're at the end of a long process that included building a fire station, moving the fire department, and it's up to all of us to get to the finish line in a way that's appropriate for what each of the constituencies that we represent. So I'm saying to you that as long as the council keeps moving forward, and I appreciate very much how you are doing that, and the questions are important, and we have to answer them. But that doesn't mean we need to slow down. So at some point, we're going to get you a real number. Right now, it's 6. It might be more. It might be remaining at 6. There might be another variable that we need to ask. At some point, we're going to ask you to do a first reading. At some point, we're going to ask you to meet and take a vote. And we're going to ask you to decide among yourselves whether you're going to be able to appropriate this money so we can complete both projects. And that's, to me, that's the answer to the questions. Now, if people don't think we should go ahead, or I know that some counselors are concerned about the spending, it's the COVID, et cetera, I totally appreciate that. I was a counselor. I know what that means. But, you know, in the beginning of the day, we decided that we were going to do a library and a fire station. This is where we're at. We're at the end, and we have plans in place. They're evolving for us to get to the finish line. And so I'm saying to everybody, let's keep moving ahead. This is a good meeting. You got the information that you needed up to a point. We have a gap. We're working like hell to get that gap filled. Some of it's with partnering up with the library. Hopefully we can have some information for you within a short period of time. And then we're asking you all to do your thing and to get to at least a meeting where you have a discussion and a vote. And then, of course, we can see how that plays out. But things have to keep moving along. If we don't keep moving along, that's the death knell to everything. So let's just keep moving along and keep answering questions. Build the team. We're building a team here, and let's keep moving ahead. So that's my pitch for the fire station.
Thank you, David. That's a good pitch. I appreciate that. Councilor Forgy, you have a comment or a question? I think you're on mute.
How's that?
You got it. That's your.
Actually, it's been weighing heavy. I'm very glad that David spoke the way he did. We have received a lot of correspondence from a lot of people, and everything that everyone has said tonight about some confusion out there about what is going on. I mean, people are still saying, why don't you look at this place, or why don't you look at that place for a better site? One of my concerns, and nobody's really asked the question, we're talking amongst ourselves again, okay? But the question is, what about our taxpayers? What about the people in Greenfield that have to foot the bill? I am very worried about them. I'm a numbers person. I understand what is going on in life in our community. There's a lot of hardship out there right now, but nobody has to this point really come forward and said, how do we reach out to people that are feeling this overwhelming, they feel like they've been run over by their government. That's how they feel. Um, what do we need to do? Who is going to protect the taxpayers? Are all the taxpayers in favor of this? I do understand everybody said we had a referendum. The majority of voters voted it. It's true. I was one of those voters. I voted it. I'm in favor of a new library. But the way it was marketed to the town was absolutely wrong. And that's where our issue is right now. So people are now choosing sides. And I worry about, and these will be questions that I'll have for Liz at this point. I worry about the fact that people are not going to be able to take any more increase in what's going on. We'll hit our levy ceiling. That bothers me. And we know that Liz has told us that we do have the capacity to borrow the $5 million. But my question is, do we have the capacity to pay it back? These are all valid, very valid issues that people are having, not the intellectual of, yes, we need the library, yes, we need the fire station. These are the bread and butter issues that people are dealing with every day. And I'm really concerned about that. And it's bothering me. So I have no answers to it. Just the question to Liz, will we be able to pay it back?
I think you're on mute, Liz.
Sorry. City Council has supported and approved our policy of staying to 8 to 10% of the operating budget. What that means is you are committing to debt service that is 8 to 10% of the operating budget.
Right.
So this falls within that. So you're either committing to that or you're not. Does that mean that something else doesn't come in some year that's higher and you're shifting, you're deciding not to fund something over something else? Maybe, but who has a crystal ball? Who knows what, 10 years down the road's going to look like? But you have this commitment of staying to 8 to 10% of the operating budget. If the debt service stays within that, if you must be saying, I'm not comfortable with 8 to 10%.
All right, so we have a number of people who'd like to jump in now. I do want to follow this line of thinking, though, so I'm going to throw it back to you, Councilor Forgy, for a follow-up.
Thank you. No, I understand the 8 to 10% debt limit, and yeah, it's within our policy and everything else. What concerns me now more than anything else is that revenues are down across the board, federal, state, and local revenues. We also, if we were talking about a tax rate of $15 per thousand, I wouldn't hesitate at all because I know that there is a lot of room in there to make things happen. But with a loss of revenue, people being out of work, issues that are coming on, I'm not saying these are not good ideas, and I'm not saying they're not worthy of funding. I am saying, what about the people that have to pay the bill at the end of the day? Is that something that everybody here is thinking about, or are we all talking to ourselves again, and we're all on the same page? And again, Liz, you've mentioned before in the past that our obligations to our retirement fund keep increasing, that our obligations to our health insurance keep increasing, there's, you know, there's a limit here. There's going to be a little bit of room, but that's it. There's going to be a little bit of room. And so my problem is the pressure that it puts in on the individual citizen in Greenfield. They elected me. I got to look out for them.
Thank you, Councillor Forgy. Did anyone have a response to that piece before I go back to further questions? David Singer?
I want to join Councillor Chris Forgy in asking the question in a little bit of a different way. As a taxpayer, I have similar concerns. So Liz, as I understand it, to make it simple, the deciding as a policy to borrow between 8 and 10% of our operating budget means that we kind of have hard drived into our tax bill and into our budget a certain amount of payment of debt per year. And that some things come off and some things go back on, but that it's kind of a steady state, you know, that if we're borrowing an extra 5 million, you know, in a couple of years when the library gets built, 9.4 million or $5 million will be paid back to the town. That'll greatly reduce the debt. But it's built into our hard drive that, you know, that yes, there's an idea that we could save taxpayers money by borrowing less. And so people will get some sort of a pleasure from that over a short period of time. But as we go into the long periods of time, deferred maintenance or not building projects in the year 2020 versus building it in 2030 means that at the end, we're going to get really harmed about how we make our decisions. So my understanding was that this policy was a buffer to the taxpayer, that if we're borrowing at a certain rate, the taxpayer knows that we're going to stay within that rate, and that's hard driven into our taxes. Interest rates are relatively low, but we're always going to be paying on a debt. So is it fair to say that that's the case? Because I think the taxpayer, I would guess, is thinking, well, borrowing $5 million, that's a lot of money. And so my tax rate has to go up because if I borrowed $5 million, my taxes would go up pretty high. So, my answer would be, well, no, it doesn't quite work like that. The 5 million spread out over time, et cetera, et cetera. So can you explain it in that way? Because I'm sure there are people listening that, you know, will report that out, and it would be nice if they understood it, and we all understood it.
Well, you know, at the September meeting, I did go over this in the terms of the city has to stay within the constraints of 2.5. It just so happens, as you stated, David, that a certain amount is going to be dedicated to debt service. The rest of the operating budget has to stay within the constraints of 2.5. So, you know, the other thing I will also reinforce as well is ignoring maintenance costs you more in the long run. And by not taking care of things, or in this instance, escalation costs, in the end, you pay more. You do. I've been at many institutions and organizations that are crumbling, are under the amount of deferred maintenance they have to do because they've ignored it. So the answer is not to just do any capital and not do any maintenance. So again, from the rating agency standpoint as well, they also like to see you maintain that steady level, that 8 to 10% of the operating budget. You know, and I talked a little bit at that meeting about what it means is that you as a council and the mayor, as mayor of the city, when you put forth a budget, you're saying these are our priorities and you vote on them. And we are saying that 8 to 10% of our budget is a priority to debt service, that we are going to maintain things. So will other costs come along? Yes. Could state aid increase? Yes. Could state aid decrease? I've seen in the course of my career, I've seen it go every which way, you know? So I think that the idea that this is addition, people cannot, they need help with understanding it's within the constraints of 2.5. It's within the operating budget. It's not like the high school. It's not a debt exclusion as an additional tax. And maybe you make that differentiation, you know, this isn't a debt exclusion. It's not on top of.
Right. Thank you, Director Gilman. I think it's important to have this discussion so that we all know where we stand. And there were debt projections that Director Gilman sent out to council. I think probably also in,
Yeah,
I don't know, August or September, maybe. And our total debt as a percentage of the operating budget right now is below our guidance. We're either in the 5.6, I think, last year, and 7% this year. And so, as chair of Capital Committee, we do take these questions into consideration for the very long term. So when there's a somewhat unforeseen cost escalation, like we're seeing with the fire station, that to me doesn't, thinking in terms of the Capital Committee, that won't manifest as a huge tax increase. What that means is that needs to be factored into the long-term borrowing and debt and capital picture of the city. And as I think the mayor stated in a memo, at least one memo, it probably means that the police station, a new police station, is not really feasible within the next decade. So, you know, we are aware of these numbers. These numbers are not jumping around. We have a lot of detail, but it's absolutely worthwhile for us to talk them out. Now, I know I had a number of names in the chat and I didn't get to everyone. I am going to go back to Councillor DeSorger for a question, but well, actually, I will go to you now. Councillor DeSorger, was that about this line of thinking? Because I want to kind of follow this to the end before we move on.
I can speak to where we are right now.
Go
I have
ahead.
things that I wanted to say, but
It's your chance.
okay. So we're talking about one part of what DOR will tell us to do to stay within a certain percent of borrowing. How are we with our stabilization? We're supposed to be 3 to 5% with there. Are we there right now? Because I know that affects our bond rating also.
Good question.
That's for Director Gilman, please.
Okay, so we are currently 2.9 because of what we not having free cash the prior year due to a number of reasons. But the policy is to replace that from free cash. So we have already voted 260,000 that we need to replace, and we just submitted an order for DPW for a match on Main Street. And when that's replaced, yes, we're at 3.37 in general stabilization. And we also will be replacing, through the discussion we had prior, more in capital stabilization. And that's what they look at. They look at all the stabilizations. They don't just lean on general, they lump them together. So in my best world, great finances, I would like to see us up at 3 million, you know, but I am adamant that it at least needs to be 2, and we will be there. We will be above that when we replace what we've taken out. So The other thing I would want to talk to is a good move that was made on doing the OPEB stabilization, because believe it or not, it has done very well. Last year, the one portion of cannabis revenue that was voted brought in 162,000, and we've brought in another, I'll say another 17,000 thus far this year. So that fund goes toward those retirement costs that Councilor DeSorger was speaking about, not the pension, but the health insurance benefits. I also do advocate for doing another stabilization for the pension. We'll see how well we do with free cash. There will be multiple competing needs, but I do think that we actually have managed the revenue reduction and our balances and stabilization very well through this whole COVID pandemic. I do not have any news, and I'm actively looking all the time on the outlook for 22. But again, I keep hearing the state saying that they saw better than they thought they would realize on revenues. So they were predicting a more dire situation. So we'll see. We received a revised governor's budget, which is exactly in line with what I gave you for a budget reduction vote. Well, the final cherry sheet generally gets larger, but hopefully is minimally that, the revised governors. And we've dealt with it and submitted a budget reduction to deal with it.
So we just had an order to reduce our own budget by $370,000
That's correct.
due to shortfalls just on our.
No.
Okay.
If you look at the information that was provided with that, it's due to a reduction in state aid and an increase in the cherry sheet assessments. That's what it's due to. We are already accommodating these reductions with this vote.
All right. And there was a reduction of $25,000 from stabilization from that, but you're still satisfied that we're within where we should be with stabilization.
Yeah, the 25,000 was, or 21,000 was from capital stabilization, and it did. With that taken out, we're still at 2.99 or whatever. We're just under 3. When we replace at least the 260,000 we've taken out, we will be at 3.37. So I'm confident we will do that. I'm confident the council will support doing that, as it is our policy to replace anything we take out.
Very good. So I have very similar concerns to what Councilor Forgy said. And I feel as if what David Singer said about us being at the end of the project, I feel like we are at the end of one project and that we are at the beginning of another, and that we're not quite sure exactly where we are. And I wanted to know what, I have been listening to all of these meetings, and despite the $17 million figure that we're having, I'm concerned that it might be a little higher than that. And I wanted to know from Director Gilman, what do you think is the most that we could possibly borrow? Are we at 5 million because a bond rating would change if we borrowed more than that? Do you have any concerns about where we are with our borrowing?
We're managing it, and that's why we're asking for 5 million. When we get to be able to reduce the authorization for the library, but we can't do that till it's complete, we're in good shape. So what we're doing right now is managing the next 4 years of regular capital and maintaining, because you're right, you don't want to go to the max on your credit card. You don't want to go right up to the limit, you know? So you need to maintain a comfortable distance. And so that is why you're only seeing the 5 million until we can get through the library rescission. And that's a much different picture, a much more comfortable place on the debt limit. So again, and that was the whole purpose of presenting you the debt schedules, is that you could see that, yes, we're anticipating over 2 years authorizing another 4 million in capital or another 3.8 million in the subsequent 8 years, you know? So that's all in there, as well as a conservative percentage increase to the operating budget. And we still stay within 8 to 10%.
Okay, thank you. Well,
Thank you.
can I finish? Can I ask one other question, Councilor Wheeler?
Do you mind holding it for just a moment,
Nope.
Councilor DeSorger? We're going to go to Councilor Elmer and then come back to David Singer. Councilor Elmer, you have the floor.
Thank you. I was just going to take another crack at answering the voters who say, how can you know, if you borrowed $5 million, that's going to come out of my taxes. The way I think of it is the bonds are moving on one train track and the taxes move on another. And if you play the bonds right and only borrow more money as the old bonds retire, you can keep it at a level pace, like Liz describes, and the taxes don't go up because of the bonds. The taxes go up because taxes go up. Everything costs more. That's a separate problem.
Yeah,
And we're going to face that with or without the library and the fire station.
correct.
The library and the fire station, think of it as maintenance. We had a fire station that was falling apart and didn't meet code, and we had a library that was not adequate and didn't meet code. And in terms of maintaining the town, you have to build new ones. And you know, that question has been what do they say? We had a vote on it. The town decided they wanted to do this, and we are the councilors representing the town's will. And you know, I personally am for building the library and building the fire station, and just trying to figure out how to manage it in a way that we use the taxpayers' money as best as it can be used. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councilor Elmer. I agree. David Singer.
Thank you. I want to start off by saying that Councilor DeSorger and I are good friends, and that a staple of our relationship is that we love to disagree with each other about things. So in the spirit of our relationship, let me say this. We are not at the beginning. Let me give you a historical perspective, please. For 5 years, simultaneous with the library getting their act together, the Public Safety Commission tried to put together a package that they ultimately presented to the City Council a year before the library came before it, talking about a lease, purchase, whatever it was, that the City Council flatly voted down. I'm not saying it was a good or bad project, that they should or shouldn't have, but so here you are, you're working 5 years, you come before the City Council, shut down. So now they have to go back to square two. As a result of square two, the mayor found a piece of land that we were going to build the fire station on, and that was put out there about the same time that the library came before the council thereabouts. And the mayor got an earmark for $2.5 million to clean up the land. And the land was not only earmarked for the fire station, it was earmarked for a public safety complex, which would have included three appropriations. And then the virus occurred, and that earmark was lost. The At the same time that the library was being considered and a petition was filed to go to referendum, the mayor asked the city council to appropriate money to begin exploring the fire station at the same time that the library was being explored. And the city council said no, they would not appropriate money for the fire station until the vote occurred in November of 2019, which, by the way, is not even a year ago. After the library was voted in, lo and behold, the city council, as it ended its term, voted for an appropriation to start exploring what was going to happen with the fire station. And as a result, the plan came about, which was the vacant piece of land and the earmark. So now here we are in March of 2020, knowing that we can't use this piece of land, having to look for pieces of property, knowing that we have to spend money to buy it, unearthing all these other issues that were not, I agree, not talked about as clearly as they could have been. But we are not at the beginning. The fire station has been put on the back burner for the last 2.5 years. And we're now coming to you after waiting for the library to go through all of its stuff to say, guess what? We have a problem and we want to be treated with the same openness that the library was treated with when everybody was talking about their concerns for about 9 months. So this is not the beginning. It may not be the end, maybe I was hyperbolic, but it's certainly the middle. And this is something that should have been, that happens in city government. And yes, there are problems, and yes, taxpayers are concerned. I think we've answered their questions that their tax rate should remain stable with this appropriation because that's another side of the ledger. I think we've given you up to $750,000 what we're going to spend the money for and what we need. And we're just a little bit away from giving you the final amount. So I think we're doing pretty darn good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. Councillor DeSorger, you have right of reply.
Oh, thank you so much. You spoke beautifully, David, and I love all of those words that you said. I just keep thinking to myself, well, we're just not quite sure where we're going yet. So that made me think that we were at the beginning. But I do know how hard everybody's been working. I just thought, we don't even really know where we're going to be yet. So that's why I think of it as the beginning, despite how hard everyone's been working at it. Therein lies the problem with me with the voting part. So, but I do realize that this is something that actually people have been talking about for, sounds like 25 years. So I guess, truthfully, that is not beginning, middle, and end would be another story. I just don't know where we're going to be at. And I did listen yesterday and I thought, okay, we're going to build a temporary fire station and this would be for Mr. Joyce. I thought, we're actually, it was going to be such a big place that we're going to divide it into 2 separate buildings because if we put it all in one, we'd need a fire suppression system. So we're going to divide it into 2 separate buildings so that we don't have to put a fire suppression system into the temporary fire station. So that is a question for Mr. Joyce. Thank you.
Counselor, I have to apologize. Could you summarize the question so I know what I'm trying to answer? I apologize.
Okay. Yesterday, I believe that you said to save money, we are going to make we're going to have 2 separate buildings so that we don't have to put a fire suppression system in. Is that correct?
That is a correct statement, yes.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. Quickly, I'm going to throw it to Chief Strachan. Did you want to speak on this piece, Chief?
I did. I think the more important issue with dividing it into 2 different structures for the apparatus bay is the parking lots as is will not fit one bay that would fit everything. And so that's why it's being divided in 2. The suppression system's secondary to that.
Thanks, Chief. I'm gonna throw it to President Stemple now.
I just also wanted to make a quick plug for the timeline document that Mayor Weingartner had sent over to the council. It is a very clear timeline of where we've been and where we're going with, I would say, estimations for our appropriations for each step of the way. And I want to give a kudos to the mayor's office and to Mr. Joyce for creating that for us. If you haven't seen it yet, it was sent to us on October 9th. I would forward it out, but I don't want to break open meeting law. So if you just search your inbox for whatever you received from the mayor's office, probably forwarded from Tammy on October 9th. It's a really helpful backdrop. I've been using that document to follow along. And so we can kind of, we do know where we're going and we do know where we've been, but all these questions that we're asking are nice additions to what's been laid out in front of us. I just want to make a quick plug for that.
Thanks, President Stemple. Okay. All right. Somehow we got through the backlog of questions there. I'm sure there's more. Who has other questions? Or maybe we're making progress here. I know we're making progress. The question for the subcommittee here is, do you have the information that you need to vote in November? I know we don't have all the information that we want. It would be great if, you know, negotiations were finished on a site for the permanent station by then. But if not, are there any further questions that you'd like to ask tonight or in the next month? My question, which I think I'll address to the mayor, is if there is a need to kind of bump up this timeline and move things as quickly as possible, will you be considering calling a special meeting to hold a first reading on the appropriation order that we're talking about? Because I don't believe it actually ended up making it into the posting for tomorrow night.
I'm gonna say anything is possible. At the moment, and maybe Neil, he can certainly chime in if he wishes, because he's the keeper of the schedule, except for when I flash other things in front of him. I don't anticipate that needing to be done. I think the time frame that we're on, November, is fine if it works with your rules and how you proceed.
Let me interrupt. I'm sorry. So my understanding now is that because the order was changed and the first reading was not placed on tomorrow night's agenda, so that this would actually push the timeline into December for a vote.
Right. So is that really your question for me? Because I was going to say, as far as I think this project is concerned, December is okay as well. And this is where I might let Neil chime in if he wanted to. It's just as we have said all along, he would like to go out to bid in early December. So you're mid-December for a temporary. We would anticipate wanting to know that we had the funding that we've requested in place before we did that. So I don't mean to be punting to Neil, but I guess I am, to fully answer your question. Right now, certainly if it could be done in November, that would be a good thing, but we would not, that I am aware of, overly concerned about a mid-December vote. And if you're ready to see if Neil wants to help with that answer, I'm happy to yield.
Neil Joyce, do you have anything to add about that?
I would just offer, I think it behooves everybody to move this as quickly as possible. I understand the sensitivity of the issue, and I'm certainly not downplaying the additional funds that we're seeking, but it's to everybody's best interest to move this as quickly as possible. And that's respectfully, I'll stop there.
Thank you. David Singer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me, a non-counselor, to ask a question. I mean this in conjunction with what the mayor is saying, that I think it would be, the ideal situation would be that you voted on this in November. I understand that because we're providing you with information periodically that seems to change, including the requisition, that may not be possible. Let me ask you, I don't remember the details of this rule, but let me ask you this. What is the rule about a first reading? How many days before the vote does that first reading have to take place?
Does anyone on this call know the answer to that?
Where's Kathy when you need her?
I know there's posting regulations of 5 days, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah, we have the posting regulations.
I'm
I
not
think,
thinking about that. I'm thinking you could hold a special meeting. If we fill in this gap, the $750,000 gap over the next week, let's say, and we give you something more firm so that the counselors feel comfortable that that amount is there. And that amount doesn't come from a request for more money from you. It comes us telling you how we filled the gap. Can you have a first reading, maybe a lunchtime first reading or something like that, and then keep it on the? Well, that's what we used to do. I mean, it's call what you want, but and that passes the test, and then and put it on November. If you're not ready in November, you can always table it, or it could always be changed at chairs in the beginning of November. But I really, from both the fire station and the library's point of view, it just helps to target dates, like us targeting July 1st for the temporary, us targeting November for your meeting. That just makes people work really hard to get stuff done. If we can't get stuff done, then we understand what the plan B is. But Madam President, you're on the line. Is that something that works for you?
Taking it one day at a time. We'll see what comes our way.
Okay, you're not removing from an option that you would vote on. You would have this in front of you in November.
I'm not against that, but obviously we'll see what comes to play. If this.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I ask. Thank you.
President Stemple is reserving her right to come down in either way on lunchtime meetings. It's a controversial subject.
Oh, I didn't know
I'm
that.
available 12:45 to 1:45 every day. The lunchtime meeting's completely fine with me. Brigham can attend
That's
as
how
well.
we used to do it. I don't know. Maybe I'm old school. I don't know.
And
Especially virtual, it's very possible.
I also work through lunch.
Well, I think we'll probably be discussing this at committee chairs. I think it makes sense for everyone to continue this discussion around the timeline and how expeditious we should be. But certainly, if there's developments, we want to hear about them. I'm sure we will, because that will factor into everything. Okay. Any questions from counselors? We're a little over 90 minutes in here. It's been a productive 90 minutes. We covered a lot of ground. We're never going to get all the way to the bottom, but I hope we've clarified some things. But are there further comments or questions? Mayor.
I just want everyone to know that I have a wand. If anybody needs the use of that to get anything done, I don't mean to make light of the situation. It
Well,
is, it is very serious. And the wand's actually intended to be used for the Halloween celebration for the city, but it's to let you all know that we are completely and totally serious here. Every single person on that building committee, whether it's temporary or permanent, pays taxes in this city. We share the same concerns as Councillor DeSorger and the same concerns as Councillor Forgy. And we would not present something to you that we didn't think was absolutely necessary and could be affordable. It means, as I think Director Gilman put it to you, it means that but we knew this anyway, would, we'll engage in belt tightening for a couple of years, but I can't think of any better reason to do it.
thank you, Mayor. And keep that magic wand in your back pocket. Okay. Any more questions tonight?
I just want to quickly address and thank both the mayor's office and the building committees for being so forthright with information. I know that there's been some times where my request for information may have seemed like a secondary project to what you were already working on, especially this magical timeline that I was talking about and I'm so in love with. But I really think it's important during this process to make sure that all counselors have the information they need, and that the constituents are seeing these answers as well. I myself have been receiving, and I'm sure all counselors have been receiving emails from constituents daily, many, probably 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I want to make it very clear that the role that we play here is information gathering. And I want to just reinstate that there's no, I'd like to think that no one here is trying to block a project. We're just trying to get information so that we can make the best possible decision for the city when it does come time to vote. And so I just want to reiterate my thank you for all of you for being so forthcoming with information when we ask for it. I think it's been a really great effort on all fronts. And it's been transparent, it's been open. And I can't thank you enough for just giving us the information we need to make this very important decision.
Thank you, President Stemple. So with that, I think we've concluded our discussion for the evening. Councilors expect to be voting on this in November or December. But I hope that we've addressed most of your questions tonight, and we do have just an enormous amount of backlog of information in our inboxes, and I'm sure that Liz or the mayor can dig any of that back out if you have trouble finding it, or let me know if you have trouble finding it. So we do actually have more business to discuss. It's not very exciting, but if I can get back to, let's see if I can get back to the Ways and Means agenda here. We do have first readings. So does anyone have their agenda open who would like to read a first reading? If not, I'm sure I will eventually find it. Okay, I've got it. City Council first reading, October 20th, 2020. The first one is rescinded, so I'm not going to read it. Reduce the FY21 general fund operating budget appropriation of $53,879,442 by the amount of $370,000 for a revised FY21 operating budget total of $53,509,442. Authorize increase Fund 1585 Ambulance Revolving Fund spending limit $40,000 for a revised spending limit of $112,000 for the fiscal year 2021. Appropriate $32,423 for GSET fiber and equipment. Appropriate $42,900 from the General Stabilization Fund for the appraisal of right-of-ways along Wisdom Way. That does it for first readings. I'm sorry I didn't thank everyone that was on the call for before I realized I should have known that everyone would jump off as soon as I went into first readings. But to those of you still here, thank you for sticking this one out. It's been a long one, but we do appreciate it. Is there any other business? Councillor Forgy.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we had a really great discussion this evening, and we have a council meeting tomorrow. Will all of this be brought out to the full council, and will we have another round of discussions like we've had this evening?
Well, that's a great question. I think our hope in discussing this process at committee chairs was that councilors would jump on this meeting, like many of them did, and ask most of their questions there. Because at the time, we thought we would have a very full agenda at the council meeting. Now, as it turned out, we don't have a full agenda, but neither do we have this order before us tomorrow. So from my standpoint, the discussion, any discussion around it would happen during communications with the mayor and the city hall. And certainly there's nothing stopping us from continuing that discussion tomorrow. But I don't believe there's anywhere in the agenda set for an express amount of time. Yeah.
What if I could? Is the council president still online?
I believe she hopped off.
Okay. So my question would be, is it an appropriate place to bring up discussion under new business or old business?
My standpoint generally is that reasonably anticipated items should be posted. And so I don't believe that we would be able to have a substantive back and forth amongst councilors tomorrow night. And now that would be, I don't mean to speak for President Stemple, but that if I were chairing the meeting, that would be my interpretation of things. Now that said, 3 councilors or President Stemple or the mayor could call a special meeting for this first reading. And if that were to happen, that could be an appropriate place to post discussion. And at that point, you could have a discussion between the councilors. I guess that's my interpretation.
Another
Yeah.
question.
Sure.
Do we have to have a public hearing on this money piece?
Well, actually, I don't want to. I would probably punt that to Kathy
Okay,
if she
I'm
were here.
confused too.
I think the public hearing is part of the second reading, and so that would happen at the second meeting, and probably it would happen prior to our vote, whether it's in November or December. It would happen at that same meeting.
I'm just, please understand, I am just concerned that counselors that have not watched this meeting this evening are missing a great deal of information. And just the debate itself, just the back and forth, it speaks volumes. And I would hate for people to not be, that the information that we've all shared here tonight would not be made available to them. I realize people have to take responsibility for themselves, but I still feel there should be a large group discussion on council.
Yes, yes, I hear that, and I know that there will be, and it may be that it's the night of the
Exactly.
vote, but I think um, I think that it will happen. Anyone else? Okay. In that case, the next meeting of Ways and Means is scheduled for November 17th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. Via WebEx. I'll now hear a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Elmer.
Moved by Elmer. Is there a second? Is there a second? The dog seconded. Seconded by a dog.
Wants his dinner.
This meeting is now adjourned.
Is that you,
7:20.
John, or is that you, Chris?
Dinner. Yeah.
All right. For the purposes of the minutes, I think Councillor Forgy seconded that. But
Okay, thank you.
that's not what I meant. Oh boy. Oh, it's dinner time. I should have eaten before this meeting.
Me too. But
Start barking. Start barking.
I'm about to. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate everything, and we'll see you tomorrow. Good night. This meeting is adjourned at 7:21.
thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, John.